Hi, I'm Victoria Peat, and if you are making foundation paper piece triangle in a square quilt blocks, you might want to prep your fabrics before you start sewing. If that's the case, I have got a PDF download that is ideal for you. It is a template pack to help you prep and cut your fabrics. In this tutorial, I'm going to talk to you about how you use each of these templates using both solid fabrics and fabrics with a print. If you're making triangle and a square quilt blocks and you've decided on the foundation paper piecing method, you may like a helping hand when it comes to prepping your fabrics. Frequently, when I'm doing foundation paper piecing, I will wing it a little and use scraps of fabric, or I'll work with the larger pieces that I cut down as I go. These are the methods that generally work for me, but when it comes to making triangle in a square quilt blocks, the angles can sometimes make things a little bit more challenging, and you get the angles wrong and you feel like you're wasting fabric, or you're continually having to unpick the sewing that you've just done. So to help the process of fabric prep go a little bit more smoothly, I like to use a template to cut out the fabrics to a size that's just about right, whilst minimizing the wastage and reducing the chance of getting things wrong. So I've designed this set of printables that help you prepare these fabrics when you're making the triangle in a square blocks. I've got a set of templates that has 11 different sizes of triangle in a square quilt blocks. So I've designed the printable to go with those. So for each of the sizes in the template pack, in the free printable that you can get from the website, you have got templates for each of those sizes. So you've got ranging from the 1.5 and 2 inch, all the way through the variety of different sizes that you get, all the way up to the really large triangle in a square that come all the way up 5.5, all the way up to the 6-inch triangle in a square, which is this largest one here. So there's a template for each of those sizes. So have a look at the website, you sign up for the newsletter and you can get a copy of these templates. So for each of the different size of triangle in a square, you've got two templates. You've got template A and a template B. Template A is for the main triangle, and template B is for these smaller side triangles. And depending on whether you're using a patterned fabric or a solid fabric will depend on whether you need one half of this template or the whole of this template. In terms of cutting your fabrics, we're going to be cutting, we're going to look at two different methods. We're going to look at one way we're cutting singular pieces and one way we're cutting from a strip. You'll see that on template B, on each of the template B, it talks about the size of the rectangle to cut, and that just helps you with minimizing that wastage. The amount of fabric that we're cutting is the size of the finished area on your foundation paper piece section, plus your 1/4 of an inch, plus a tiny bit extra. So there's a little bit of wiggle room, but not too much. So we're not wasting too much fabric, but it's worth just noting that when you're using these so that you know that you've got a little bit of room, but not too much when you're placing your fabrics. So what I'm going to do is take you through how to use both of the templates. So we have the template A that is for the main part of the triangle, the main triangle in the triangle in a square. I'm going to say the word triangle a lot in this video. We're going to be cutting that out of a solid fabric, but depending, it doesn't matter whether you're using a solid or a print, you would cut these out in the same fashion. When it comes to the side triangles, we're going to use template B, and I'm going to show you on a print fabric and a solid fabric. So to start off with the template A, you can cut from a larger square of fabric if you like, but I've just got a rough size of square that I know that my triangle is going to fit into. Because I've got a nice straight edge here, I can line the template up along the bottom edge, and I can either freehand cut around the outside, and that's where a rotating cutting mat or a smaller mat is useful, because then you can move your template and your fabric around without disturbing the template and the fabric. If you like, you can attach this temporarily using a little bit of glue pen on the reverse of your template, and you can just place that on your fabric, and that will just stop it from moving around and you're not having to faff about too much. Now, if you're making a lot of triangle in a square pieces, then you can make these templates out of card or template plastic to make them last a little bit longer. Now, if you're really confident with your rotary cutter, you can freehand cut around the outsides. But if you're not, then you can use your ruler. And this is where it's great if your template's been stuck to the fabric, because it then won't move around. So I'll just line this up, and then I can trim off this excess fabric. And it is very easy to just accidentally shave off a little bit of your template each time you do a cut. So if you are doing lots, then it is a good idea to make it out of something a little bit more durable, so that by the time you've made however many, the template hasn't got smaller and smaller as you've shaved bits off. Right, so there's if you're cutting one, and that can be done from any form of square of fabric or a scrap of fabric, however you like. If you're making lots and you want to be a little bit more efficient and you don't want any form of wastage at all, or reduce that amount of wastage, what you can do is you can cut a strip of fabric and use the templates to cut from along that strip. So what I've done is I've taken the template and I've measured, so I'm doing a 2-inch triangle in a square, and I've measured from this flat top to the base, and I've got 2 3/4 inches. So I have a strip of fabric that's 2 3/4 inches, and then I can place my template on the fabric. And you can see, I forgot to mention on this first one, you can see on the templates there's a very faint line, which is to show the grain of the fabric, or the grain of where the fabric will be once you've made your final block. It just gives the block a little bit more stability. I know we're doing foundation paper piecing and that creates that stability, but you're going to take this paper out, and what you don't want is for your blocks to go skew if at any point, especially if you're not doing a large amount of quilting on the top of your finished project. So try and keep with the grain of the fabric to try and keep it nice and straight. So now what we can do is you place it on, so you're lining up this short top of the triangle that's been snipped off and the base. And then you can freehand or use your ruler. We can freehand a little bit. And you've cut one triangle. You can then rotate that round. And you can trim off this other side. So yes, you have got this bit of wastage. But if you're cutting multiples, you can then take this template, rotate it round, use this cut edge, and then you can use this diagonal that we've cut by creating this triangle here. Hold it in place and either use your glue pen and a ruler, or if you're happy to freehand cut. And that cuts your next triangle, and then so on and so forth. I haven't done a long strip, but you can see how you would just repeat that process each time, rotating the triangle so that you're creating multiples. Now, if you're quite confident and you've done a fair amount of patchwork and quilting in the past, you can actually layer up these strips so that you're creating multiple colours or lots all in the same colour, to just try and speed things up a bit. But you can see you'll get a little bit of wastage here, and then depending on how clever you've been with cutting, you'll have a bit of wastage at this end. But me being a lover of foundation paper piecing, I will use all of these pieces here. And of course, this piece is nice and big. Those just go into my scrap pile with the rest of my red fabric that I know that I can use again in the future. So that's using the templates to cut from the main triangle. So when it comes to making these little side triangles, things can be a little bit more tricky to deal with, or maybe not tricky, but you just have to be more mindful of the fact that the triangles here are a mirror image of each other. So you can see on template B how it's got a diagonal line, but that diagonal line doesn't run from corner to corner because of the shape of those triangles. If I cut, I've got one template here that I've cut in half. If I show you here, you can see that these templates run in the same direction. They're not, because they're the mirror image of each other, they're not equal halves, if that makes sense. So you just need to bear that in mind. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you, first of all, how to cut from a solid piece of fabric, and then I'm going to show you with a patterned piece of fabric. So you can see on template B, you've got a measurement here, and it tells you, I mean, you can measure the rectangle if you like, but just for ease, I've put on here what size to cut. So it says cut 2.5 by 3 inches. So if you have a square, oh, that's not very, didn't think that through. Let's move that out of the way. So if you have got a rectangular fabric that's cut 2.5 by 3, you can use your just one template that you can place on, depending on your left or right-handed, in the bottom left-hand corner, lining up one line, the other line, and the top line with the 3 edges of your fabric. And then you can cut. Again, you can stick it in place with a glue pen temporarily, or if you're comfortable with your rotary cutter, you can just cut along that line. Again, if you're cutting lots and lots of these, you may want to transfer onto a piece of card or some template plastic. So you can see here I've now cut that into 2. And these, if I bring in a template A, can be used. See, if I don't flip any one of these over, you're creating one triangle that goes here, but this one, because it's a mirror image, doesn't sit in place. But because it's a solid fabric, you can flip it over, assuming that you've got a good quality solid fabric, then, which most of them are, you can flip that over so that you can create your 2 side triangles. Okay, so that's if you're cutting one. If you're cutting multiple, what you can do is you take a strip of fabric, and I've cut that 3 inches high, so it's the same width here, and then you can cut that down into rectangles, which you can then use half of the template to then cut those rectangles in half. It's entirely up to you how you want to do that, or you could just use the half a template, cut, rotate, and cut, and then you've got the straight edge. So it's up to you how you want to do that. But the joy of the solid fabric is that because it has no right or wrong side, it's very easy to cut and prep from a larger strip of fabric. So when it comes to cutting fabrics that are patterned, of course you don't have the right side and the wrong side. So what you'll need is either to cut this template in half, or you'll just use half of this, and you can cut by placing the template in the corner. So you're lining up those 3 edges of your template, and you cut here, and then you can take that template and you can flip it over and do the same thing. Or you can take one half of the template like this and the other one like this, and you can cut up and down on these sides. So I think I would be tempted to take one template, put it in place, and then I would cut this straight edge. And just turn that round. Again, use your glue pen if you'd like to. So you've cut one. So that's from the reverse. And now we've got another straight edge here. Line up the edges of the template with the raw edges of the fabric. So those are my scraps that I will save. So we've cut one with the template right side up and one with it flipped over. So now what you see is that we've created your side triangles to go with your main triangle, and you've got one facing in each direction. Whereas if you'd cut both of them straight from the template with both halves right way up, you would have created a triangle that was a side triangle that was the wrong way round. So when it comes to cutting multiple from a strip, you can cut individual rectangles. So we're going back to the 2.5 by 3. So you've got a strip here that's 3 inches long. So you could cut those into 2.5-inch rectangles. And then you can layer those on top of each other. But what you have to bear in mind, depending on how many you're making, is that half of them will need to be cut this way, and then half of them will need to be cut this way, because you won't have enough of the triangles in facing in the right direction. So if I take my template B, and you could stack them up if you're cutting lots and lots, half of them going in this direction, and then the other half you need to cut with the diagonal going in the other direction. So just swivel that round. So we then have 2 going in this direction, and then you've got 2 going in this direction, and that will allow you to make, if we take 1 here, 1 here, 1 here, and 1 here. It just means that by working with a print, they're going to look fabulous, but you've got a little bit less flexibility as to how you cut those out. You have to be a little bit more mindful. And remembering to turn your templates over so that you've got some going in one direction and some going in another. So that is using the templates, both template A for the main triangles and using template B to cut side triangles both in the solid fabric and a print fabric. The only other thing that you need to bear in mind is if you're trying to use directional fabric, that's a whole extra step on, but that really depends on how you pardon me, it's how you're using your block in your final piece of work. You might be using them singularly, or you might be using them with squares to create more complex designs. And if you're creating something like a star, then these will go around a central square. And then, of course, the angle at which these are placed will depend on which way you want to cut your fabrics out. So that does become more challenging. But that's really for people that are more advanced with their patchwork and quilting. So this is really for fabrics that are a little bit more generic, or if you're not really bothered about which way up the fabrics go, because at the end of the day, quilts that are being used are loved and they're always up, so it doesn't really matter. So that's it for those. I hope that's given you a little bit more confidence as to how to use these templates, and it will really help you to reduce the amount of wastage that you are getting when you're cutting these triangles. And by having the triangles kind of the right size, a little bit bigger than we need, but not much, it just helps you with your fabric placement. Keep an eye out on the website. There's a full tutorial with step-by-step illustrations on how to use these. Plus, you will also be able to find where to buy your templates. And there will soon be, if there's not already, a tutorial on how to make these once that you've got your fabrics all cut and prepped. Thanks so much for watching this demo video. I hope that this will help you get your fabrics all prepped and ready for when you are making triangle and a square quilt blocks. Don't forget to check out my other patchwork and quilting videos. As well as more FPP demos, I have a great series on the Humble 4-patch quilt block. Until next time, thanks again for watching.